Have you ever shared an exciting goal with someone, and then somehow, never actually followed through? You told your friend you were going to start your own business. You posted on social media about your new fitness journey. You announced to your family that this was finally going to be your year. And then, quietly, almost invisibly, nothing happened. Not because you were lazy. Not because the dream wasn't real. But because something subtle and deeply human got in the way. Today, we're going to explore one of the most overlooked pieces of wisdom in Buddhist teaching, a truth so counterintuitive, so quietly powerful, that once you understand it, you may never announce another goal again. Stay with us. Because what you're about to hear might completely change the way you pursue everything you love. Part 1, A Zen Story, The Student Who Told Everyone. A story rooted in the ancient Zen tradition. There was once a young monk named Kaito who lived in a mountain monastery somewhere in old Japan. He was bright-eyed, full of ambition, and had recently made a decision that set his heart on fire. He was going to achieve enlightenment within 1 year. Now, enlightenment is no small thing. Most practitioners dedicate lifetimes to this pursuit. But Kaito was young, and youth carries with it a beautiful, reckless certainty. The morning after making this vow to himself, Kaito went to the dining hall and told his fellow monks. Their eyes widened. Some nodded with admiration. A few whispered to each other. One senior monk gave him a warm, approving smile. Kaito felt wonderful. He walked taller that day. He sat straighter during meditation. He ate his meals with a quiet pride. The other monks glanced at him with something that felt like respect, and he carried that feeling like a warm cloak around his shoulders. But then, a week passed. And then another. Each morning, Kaito sat down to meditate, but the cushion felt harder than before. His mind wandered more. The fire that had burned so brightly in his chest the night he made his vow had somehow dimmed. He couldn't understand it. He hadn't changed. His intention was still there. And yet, somehow, the urgency was gone. The hunger had faded. Frustrated, Kaito finally went to see his teacher, a quiet old master named Ryokan, who was known for speaking very little, and meaning everything he said. Kaito sat before him and explained everything. The vow. The announcement. The admiration of the other monks. And now, this strange emptiness where his motivation used to be. Ryokan listened without interrupting. When Kaito finished, the old master rose slowly, walked to the corner of the room, and picked up a small clay pot with a seedling inside, barely a sliver of green poking up through dark soil. He set it in front of Kaito. What would happen, Ryokan asked gently, if every morning, you pulled this seedling out of the soil to check whether it had grown roots? Kaito looked at the tiny plant. It would die, he said quietly. Ryokan nodded. Yes. He paused. And what would happen if, every time a visitor came, you held up this seedling and announced, "This will one day be a great tree," and they praised you, and you felt proud, and you bowed, and they bowed, and the seedling sat on the table, out of the soil, drinking in applause instead of water. Kaito felt something shift inside his chest. Your dream, said Ryokan, placing the pot back carefully in its corner, is not dead. It is simply hungry. And you have been feeding it to other people. Part 2, The Science and the Soul, Why Sharing Goals Backfires. Now, this ancient wisdom isn't just a beautiful metaphor. It turns out, the science agrees with old Master Ryokan more than we might expect. Psychologists call it social reality. When we tell others about our goals and receive their positive responses, the nods, the "wow, that's amazing," the likes and comments, our brains register something fascinating. They interpret that social acknowledgement as a form of accomplishment itself. In other words, your mind begins to believe that you have already done the thing. The announcement becomes the achievement, at least in the quiet circuitry of your nervous system. And once your brain senses that the reward has arrived, the drive to pursue it starts to quietly dissolve. This was studied and documented by researcher Peter Gallwitzer, who found that people who kept their goals private were significantly more likely to follow through than those who announced them publicly. And here is where the Buddha's teaching becomes not just spiritual wisdom, but practical truth. The energy that feeds a dream must be internal. The moment it becomes external, seeking validation, craving praise, hungering for recognition before the work is done, that energy begins to leak away. Part 3, A Modern Story, The Dream That Was Talked to Death. Let's bring this into the present moment, into a world of Instagram posts and group chats and vision boards pinned to bedroom walls. Meet Sarah. Sarah is 32 years old. She spent the last decade working in a job that pays her bills but drains her soul a little more each morning. One Tuesday evening, sitting at her kitchen table with cold coffee and a half-eaten takeout container, something clicked. She was going to write a novel. It had been living inside her for years, characters, scenes, a whole world quietly breathing in the back of her mind. And that Tuesday night, she felt it with absolute clarity: this is what I'm meant to do. The next morning, she texted her best friend. Her friend responded with a string of fire emojis and, "Oh my God, yes, you have to." She called her sister. Her sister said, "I always knew you were a writer." She changed her Instagram bio to aspiring novelist, coffee and chaos. She joined 3 online writing groups and introduced herself. She received 47 encouraging replies. Sarah felt extraordinary. She felt seen. She felt like a writer. She opened a blank document and stared at it for 20 minutes. Then she closed the laptop, made more coffee, and scrolled through her phone. The next day was similar. And the day after that. 6 months later, the bio still said, aspiring novelist. The document was still mostly blank. And Sarah couldn't quite explain why the fire had gone out so completely when it had felt so real that Tuesday night. Here's the painful truth no one told Sarah. She had already, in her mind, become the writer, without writing a single word. Every congratulation was a small withdrawal from the account of motivation that should have funded the actual work. The dream wasn't dead. It was just spent. Part 4, The Teaching, the Buddhist Path of Silent Effort. If you found this meaningful so far, we gently invite you to subscribe to the Buddha Coha channel, so these teachings can find you whenever you need them most. The Buddha taught with extraordinary precision about the nature of mind, desire, and the relationship between intention and action. In the Dhammapada, one of Buddhism's most beloved texts, it is written, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." But this teaching has a shadow side that is rarely discussed. When the mind becomes absorbed in the image of achievement, the fantasy of being seen as successful, admired, recognized, it begins to confuse that image with reality itself. This is a subtle form of what Buddhism calls Maya, illusion. We begin to inhabit a mental story of ourselves as already arrived, already accomplished, already transformed. And in doing so, we quietly abandon the very path that would have taken us there. There is also the teaching of viriya, often translated as right effort or energy. The Buddha described it as one of the essential qualities on the path to liberation. And viriya, in its truest form, is internal. It does not depend on the applause of others. It does not need to be witnessed to be real. In fact, the moment our effort becomes entangled with the need for external recognition, it shifts from viriya, pure, clean energy, into something more fragile. Something that needs constant feeding. Something that will inevitably falter the moment the applause fades or the attention moves elsewhere. The great Zen masters understood this intuitively. They worked in silence. They cultivated in stillness. They let the results do the speaking. There is a famous saying in Zen: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The work is the same. The world looks the same. But something internal has fundamentally, quietly shifted. And that shift, that real transformation, cannot be announced. It can only be lived. Part 5, The Seed, Protecting What Matters Most. Let us return, for a moment, to that small clay pot in the corner of old Ryokan's room. A seed, and by extension, a dream, operates on a very specific set of conditions. It needs darkness before it needs light. It needs the silent pressure of soil before it can break upward. It needs time that is not measured in applause or recognition, but in the slow, faithful accumulation of internal change. When you hold a seed in your open palm and show it to the world, you receive admiration. People say, "What a beautiful seed. Imagine what this will become." And for a moment, you feel the warmth of that possibility. But the seed, held up in the air, away from soil and water and the patient darkness of growth, is not growing. It is simply being displayed. This is what premature disclosure does to our dreams. It takes them out of the soil of private intention and holds them up under the bright light of social performance. And in that light, the praise feels like nourishment. But it isn't. Praise, in that moment, is not water. It's attention. And attention and growth are not the same thing. The Buddhist tradition speaks often of upaya, skillful means. Acting in the right way, at the right time, for the right reason. And part of skillful living is understanding when to speak and when to remain in beautiful, purposeful silence. Not every truth must be told immediately. Not every intention must be witnessed to be valid. Some things grow best in the quiet between you and the work itself. Part 6, The Transformation, 3 Practices of Silent Strength. So how do we actually live this teaching? How do we protect our dreams, nurture our intentions, and build the kind of inner strength that doesn't depend on being seen? Here are 3 practices drawn from Buddhist wisdom and supported by the experience of those who have built quietly, deeply, and well. The first practice: guard your intention like a flame. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition speaks of a butter lamp, a small flame kept burning on the altar as an offering. It is carefully shielded from the wind. Not because it is weak, but because it is precious. Because even the most beautiful flame can be extinguished by a careless breath. Your intentions deserve that same care. When you feel a dream stirring, a creative project, a personal transformation, a quiet hope about the direction of your life, sit with it before you speak it. Let it burn in the private space of your own heart for a while. Feel its warmth without needing to show it to anyone. Ask yourself honestly, am I sharing this because it will help me grow? Or am I sharing it because I want to feel the warmth of someone else's enthusiasm right now? Both feelings are human. But only one of them serves the dream. The second practice, let action be your voice. There is a particular kind of confidence that comes not from having told people what you're going to do, but from having done it. It is quieter than the confidence of the announcement. It is less flashy, less immediately satisfying. But it is also unshakable. Because it is built on something real. When you complete something in silence, when you reach a milestone that no one else witnessed, when you sit alone with the work and feel it getting better, that satisfaction cannot be taken from you. No one else's opinion can diminish it. It belongs entirely and permanently to you. The Buddha taught about the difference between samapatti, genuine inner attainment, and the performance of spiritual achievement. True growth, he suggested, is often invisible from the outside. It shows up not in declarations, but in the quiet steadiness of a life lived with integrity. Build quietly. Let the results speak when they are ready. The third practice, find your one trusted witness. This teaching does not mean becoming a hermit of the heart, sealed away from human connection and support. We are relational beings. We need each other. But there is a profound difference between announcing your dreams to the world and sharing them with one person who holds them carefully, a mentor, a close friend, a partner who understands the fragility of new beginnings. In Zen tradition, the relationship between teacher and student is built on exactly this kind of careful, contained trust. The student shares their genuine confusion, their struggles, their quiet aspirations, not for applause, but for guidance. And the teacher receives those confidences without projecting their own expectations, without inadvertently feeding the ego that craves recognition. Find your one person. Share your dream there, quietly, carefully, in the spirit of growth rather than performance. And leave the rest in the soil. Part 7, Sacred Words, Buddhist Quotes to Carry with You. Let these words settle into you like rain into deep ground. Do not speak unless it improves on silence. A teaching attributed to the Buddha. The quieter you become, the more you can listen. Rumi, whose wisdom flows alongside Buddhist teaching like two rivers to the same sea. There is no fire like passion, no crime like hatred, no sorrow like separation, no sickness like hunger of heart, and no joy like the joy of freedom. The Dhammapada. You only lose what you cling to. Teaching attributed to the Buddha. And perhaps most relevant of all. It is better to travel well than to arrive. Because the dream is not only the destination. The dream is also the quiet morning when you sat down and did the work and told no one. The dream is the seed pressing through dark soil. The dream is the flame you shielded with your own two hands. Part 8, Kaito's Return, the story completes. Let us return one final time to young Kaito, sitting in the soft light of Ryokan's room, looking at the small seedling in its clay pot. He sat with his teacher's words for a long time. And then, without saying another word, he bowed, rose, and returned to his meditation cushion. He did not announce a new vow. He did not tell the other monks he had received a teaching. He did not even write in his journal that night. He simply sat, and breathed, and returned, again and again, to the quiet, faithful work of being present. A year later, something in Kaito had changed. It was not the kind of change that announces itself. It was the kind that you notice only in the texture of small moments, the way he listened more carefully, the way he responded to frustration with a breath instead of a reaction, the way his eyes had taken on a particular kind of stillness. His fellow monks noticed. But they didn't quite have words for it. And Kaito didn't offer any. One morning, a young novice came to him, bright-eyed and burning with a new vow, and began to speak excitedly about his intentions for the year ahead. Kaito listened warmly. And when the novice finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, gently, he walked to the corner of the room, picked up a small clay pot, the same one Ryokan had once shown him, and placed it in the novice's hands. "Tend this," he said softly. "And speak less about the tree you imagine, and more through the roots you quietly grow." The novice looked down at the tiny seedling. And something in him understood, not with his mind, but with something older and quieter than thought. He nodded. And went to work. Part 9, Closing Reflection, the Invitation to Grow in Silence. So here is the question this teaching leaves with us, not as a challenge, but as a gentle invitation. What dream have you been announcing, instead of tending? Is there something alive inside you, a creative vision, a personal transformation, a quiet hope, that has been spending its energy in the bright air of other people's attention, when it needs to be pressing its roots down into the dark, faithful soil of your own effort? You don't need to be seen to be real. Your intentions do not require an audience to be valid. The work you do in silence, in the early morning before anyone is watching, in the quiet hours when no one will ever know you showed up, that work counts. It counts more, perhaps, than any announcement ever could. Plant your dream in the soil of daily action. Water it with consistent effort. Shield it from the winds of premature praise. And trust, with the patient faith of someone who understands how deep roots grow, that what is real will, in time, become undeniable. Not because you told everyone, but because you did the work. In silence. In strength. In the beautiful, purposeful quiet from which all great things grow. If this story touched something in you, if it gave you a new way of seeing the dreams you carry, then you're exactly who this channel exists for. Subscribe to Buddha Koha for teachings like this every week. Share this with someone whose dream deserves to be protected. And leave a comment below telling us, what is one goal you're choosing to tend in silence, starting today? We'll see you in the next story, where ancient wisdom meets the life you're actually living. Until then, tend your roots. Trust the soil. And grow quietly.